Hi, Misha here, and back for the 4th of July season. In 2014, we first reviewed this pistol, the Colt M45A1, the close quarters battle pistol, 45 ACP. Very, very likely the final version of the venerable John Moses Browning 1911 to be developed and go into U.S. service. And it appears in quite a few videos. But now I wanted to talk about it and compare it with Springfield's version or entry into the program that this resulted in, because a few years ago I let Fox shoot my gun here. He really liked it and asked if I could get him one. Unfortunately, for that, these are no longer in production at Colt. Why is that? I want to answer that in this video. But a little bit later, one of the Springfield versions came into my hands, and they are very, very similar. Because, well, they're both based on the 1911, first and foremost. But secondly, they were both designed for the Marine competition in 2010, and so therefore have a bunch of features. So, I told Fox, you know, this might be a good alternative, and the money was right on that Springfield. I didn't sell him the gun, but a friend was selling it. I just, hooked him up, and there you go. And this was Fox's reaction upon first cracking the box open.
Oh man, sweet box it comes with here.
Yeah, it's not bad. A couple extra mags.
Yeah.
Can't say much about the holster and the mag carrier, but at least they're present. You have something.
Oh, for sure. Oh man. Dude, what a dream to... Dude, that grip is aggressive. Definitely the first thing I notice is that grip.
Yeah.
Dude, not gonna drop this. Oh wow. So ambi safeties, which is great. Smooth, really comfortable. Slide is a dream, but let's see how that trigger is. Oh wow.
Yeah, I'll be honest. A lot of it's very similar to that Colt M45 of mine you shot and liked, but I think the trigger's a little better on the Springfield. I had them side by side.
This trigger is awesome. Yeah, the sights are real nice. They've kind of got the white dots in them, so easy to find. Pick rail. This is great, man. It's not as heavy as it looks. It's still 1911 heavy, but you can see Springfield's cut down on some weight. But, man, I guess the really thing that stands out is these grips. Most people want to change the grips out on their 1911, but these are great. Very comfortable.
Yeah, those are great. I mean, the ones that on mine that you shot were texture grips, but they were G10s, and they're a little different. But
right.
I thought you'd like them. I think I said in the email that's one of the couple of differences between that.
Right.
How do you like the color?
Oh, the color's awesome, man. Yeah. I need to kind of pull but kind of got that FDE kind of dark green. Yeah. Man, it's just comfortable. It's great. You could carry this gun and not get beat to death with it, but mag release seems to be there.
Yeah. Well, man, I did test fire it once, but let's let you give it a go.
It looks really pretty. Good looking gun.
So this is your very first 1911.
Yeah, very first.
Not shooting, but
no, I've shot a couple of years, but yeah, this is my first own. Yep. Alrighty. A little board over here. I'm gonna try to shoot a little group with. Wow. Smooth little shooter out there.
So that Springfield's a gun he's been working with for about a year now, getting familiar with. And we thought it would be kind of interesting, fun to compare it to my venerable old Colt here. Let a few folks try them out, kind of see which one's better, worse, see if there's any differences. Why not? It's a good excuse to shoot 45 ACP, which I actually did get a bag of from Phoenix Ammo recently, which is about the only place I could find 45 ball at a halfway reasonable price. You know how things are going in 2025 with ammo. And because of that, if you could, support us on Patreon, but if not, understood. But you can like, share, subscribe, and also, hey, it's a 1911. you're going to have comments, right? So definitely drop a comment, because that helps with YouTube. And with that, we're just going to dive in, talk about the history, why this gun's service was so stunted. And I do actually finally have a real number of how many served the Marine Corps, MEUSOC, all that good stuff, Force Recon. Talk about that. Why not? With that, let's dive in and go back to the 1980s, where this all began with the MEUSOC pistol. It would be really cool if I had a M45, the original clone, to show you, but I don't. Oh well. It goes back to Colonel Robert Young, who laid out specs to update the Browning 1911A1 for the 21st century combat modern era. Keep in mind, no one in the military had purchased 1911s since 1945, although they had rebuilt them during Vietnam and new components. Basically, based on these specs, you get the original MEUSOC pistol, the Marine Expeditionary Unit, special operations capable. And it's exactly what you'd expect. They take original frames, they hand select them, they deburr them, and that's pretty much it. Everything else is brand new, and they're assembled in-house at Quantico by the Precision Weapons Center, Marine Corps. So the specs and everything change over time. They do specify a pretty light trigger, 4.5, 5 pounds. Ambidextrous safety seems to be a common thing. A commander-style hammer. Typically, you'll see a 5-inch match-grade barrel. Basically, they would just take whatever components they found. Like Barstow made the original barrels. Dan Brown made a lot of the early parts. King's made some parts. Wilson would start off pretty low-key, like mag catches, extractors, and then eventually make more and more. The Novak sights, high vis and or night vision, became very popular. In the early guns would have Pachmeyer grips because they were kind of all the rage in the 80s and 90s. They have enough old 1911s, they can rework them. This is peacetime, post-Cold War. And this is known as the M45 MEUSOC pistol. But then 9/11, invasion of Afghanistan happens, and while the Precision Weapons Center has orders to build nearly 800 fresh, sort of, M45s, they really just can't keep up. They need to do so much work by hand. In fact, at the time, the M45 was all hand-fitted, and the parts were not interchangeable. It's one of the few times in U.S. service history when that was kind of allowed. They actually had to apply the serial number to multiple parts to make sure if the pistols got disassembled in service that they could go back together. But that's okay, because they were basically being given to like Force Recon, other parts of MEUSOC, which was the Marines' contribution to SOCOM and all that. Special Forces, basically the Raiders in the 21st century. The global war on terror, especially with the invasion of Iraq in March of 2003, they need more pistols, and they need them basically now. This gets them to request and be approved for a commercial off-the-shelf purchase, COTS purchases, and this kind of leads to an interim series of a couple of guns before we get to this M45A1 beginning in 2010. We enter the interim era. Recently did a big video for Memorial Day on the Beretta, mentioned the Marines, again, mostly MEUSOC, a few other kind of specialists, ended up working a little bit with Beretta to design the M9A1 2004-2005, and they ended up purchasing initially 3,500, then another 500, and then up to 7,000, 7,500. And the big deal here was the rail. This is the era when they're starting to see the utility of attaching a light. This is also when the laser grips come on. I know the color doesn't match, but there we go. And the LG 402M, and these were put on. And if you're wondering why I'm talking about the 45A CP and the MEUSOC pistol, I don't want to give the impression that's what the Marine Corps used. No. The bulk of the Marine Corps used the Beretta M9, and then a smaller number used the M9A1. The 45s, these were for their special forces elements, and just a handful of others who really needed them. And they weren't even always standard issue. They were just kind of in the toolbox, like, you know, how special forces. 2006 to 2009 period is when the M9A1 is really being picked up by the Marines, and that allows them to attach accessories, and it has a few improvements like the updated locking block. Hey, I love the Beretta. I gotta squeeze it in somehow. But as far as the MEUSOC pistol, the M45, this is the interim era. 2003, they first approach Kimber to basically design a custom version for the Marine Corps known as the ICQB. Uh-oh. One person gets that joke. And what this is, it's based on the LA Police Department SWAT team's customized Kimber. It's an early kind of rail gun. They mount them with some lights. They use modified holsters. And they start, at least on some level, issuing Wilson Combat mags. At this point, they're actually the 8-round. And they originally order 150. It's a special run, a single source COTS purchase. Boom, there you go. At the same time, the PWS is still making M45s by hand. But then by 2005, because of attrition and the growing numbers of Marines in Force Recon and the like, they need another one. And this time, they source out Springfield and purchase 150 of their operators from them, which is basically a version of the FBI's TRP, which I really considered picking up one of the Springfield Armory versions before I ran across these Colts.
Go ahead and throw another mag in it. About as smooth as a 1911 can get, man. I hate to use the word smooth, but that grip keeps this gun from jumping around so much, especially with this beaver tail on it. Man, this thing just fits the hand perfectly.
The Kimbers, the Springfields, again, between them, they have a couple of 100, 300 guns. They're starting to feature Novak night sights, again, usually a match grade 5-inch barrel. They went from Pachmeyer grips on these to G10 grips around this period. Cool choice. Some had rails, some did. Ambi safeties. Commander hammer, that seems to be a standard. A nice, crisp, single action trigger pull.
Just as good as I remember it.
Mm-hmm. Single source purchase. And they don't have a lot of Berettas. So by 2010, they put out new specifications for COTS purchase to buy the next generation of the M45 MEUSOC pistol. And that's where both this gun and Fox's Springfield operator there originate from. 3 main companies responded to the bid. the one we can just knock out right away is Carl Lippert. It's a very small company. Also, what they submitted, while it was a very accurate gun, wasn't a standard 1911 in many, many ways, and was probably the most expensive. So, out. That gets us down to the Springfield entry, which was a version of the loaded Operator. And like Fox's, it had a black slide and green frame. And as far as I know, it did have rubberized grips.
Very nice.
In other ways, it's just like you see it there. Basically, Novak night sights, standard 1913, rail, ambidextrous selector, control, what have you. And then, of course, Colt submitted a version of their 1911 railgun. But whereas the 1911 railgun has a non-standard rail, at least by government specs, that was the main thing they had to do, was add a true standard 1913 Pickaninny rail. Hey, and now it matches. Actually fits on here better than I think. That extra weight. Not a heck of a lot. Be slight. Otherwise, it's a Series 80 with the firing pin block. That's a good thing, because, you know, drop safe. Novak night sights, extended ambi, extended beaver tail with the bump, commander style hammer, solid trigger, not with the holes in it. The Springfield does have holes. G10 grips. Interestingly, it does have the straight back strap, mainspring housing, lanyard loop. I'd be lying if I said that wasn't one of the things that sold me on the Colt when they came out. 5-inch national match barrel, front and rear serrations. This would not be the first Marine pistol. They actually were putting the front serrations on guns at the PWS for quite some time. And one feature that's a little different and does make it separate from the Springfield, it has a dual recoil spring, which is meant to spread out the recoil impulse of 45 ACP, although it does make charging the slide a little heavier, but smoother. And to be fair, opinions differ on if it helps, hinders, or makes no difference compared with the Springfield MC Operator loaded there. Cool. So what do you think?
I think the Colt has a little bit, how can I say this? The Colt isn't as controllable, but it's a lot smoother and not as snippy.
I get that.
Springfield has a lot more felt recoil down towards your wrist, but
more flip.
Yeah, more flip, but seems like in rapid fire maybe easier to keep on target. But it's something about this Springfield. It seems like it's got a little more thump to it. A little more.
You can judge for yourself if it matters. And one reason that they were really keen on getting accurate shots, while they had played around with 8-round mags earlier, for this gun, because of reliability, they went with Wilson Combat 47 stainless steel 7-round mags with the metal base plate, i.e. the mag that drives Fox a little crazy because of the little bit of visible metal there sticking out.
Don't like how that little metal of the mag kind of shows down there. It makes you feel like you don't have it all the way seated.
Which I never even thought about till he picked up on it with various Wilsons over the years.
What I like about the Colt, and this is the biggest noticeable thing I've always noticed about these two guns, is the Colt has a great groove for your middle finger. If you see how I'm gripping this gun, middle finger really tucks up underneath there. It seats, versus the Operator is straight. You don't really have that big groove where, you know, I'm shooting it like I would a Glock or any other pistol.
You can tell a little bit different recoil. And there's a bunch of other things that 1911 guys can really go into about these. I'm not that. Fox isn't either. We're just out here to have fun. Because the essential manager, director of Colt, General Keyes, was former Marine, 3-star general. I'm not going to say the fix was in, but they certainly had a leg up. And despite some potential issues during testing that we'll talk about in a bit, this was officially adopted on July 20, 2012, and it was named the M45A1 CQBP, close quarters. The contract was an IDIC contract, indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity, for 5 years. The initial guaranteed purchase was 4,036 pistols, with a potential purchase of up to 12,000 pistols. And it's often repeated that that's how many the Marines purchased. No, they didn't. We'll get there. How much did each gun cost the Marine Corps? Looks to be around $1,875, with a couple of Wilson mags, some spare parts, yada yada. And since this was put into production based on the railgun, they were able to get it out quite quickly. The first ones were received by the Corps that year, and it seems like they would start delivering high volume by 2013, and very soon they would go in the field, and, well, yeah. They're so close, like the side serrations.
Oh, yeah, everything.
The safety,
the safety, the beaver tail, all that.
But mine's got a landing ring.
Yeah, it does. You got a little, well, that's for your Pokemon keychain.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I really like my M45A1. I have originals, World War I, World War II, but I don't really like shooting them all that often. I wanted a modern shooter grade 1911, and I did consider just taking a base model Colt or Springfield and doing the updates, kind of making a faux MEUSOC pistol M45. But then these came out, and I wasn't super interested in the first version. I know the first ones sold commercially did have the USMC on them, but they were also from the Colt custom shop. Cool, right? I would have been good with that if the Marine guns were from the custom shop, but they weren't. They were just from the standard Colt production line. So I waited till the standard commercial version came out, markings notwithstanding. This is the same gun as shipped to the Marines. The custom shop guns had a tuned trigger, hand-fitted parts, they checkered the front strap, some other little things, came in a fancy case, and oh yeah, they cost a lot more. So why was I gonna, pay more for a gun that I wasn't as attracted to? I waited till 2014 when the standard commercial gun here was out. Again, doesn't have the USMC on it. Oh well, I'm blind, I can't see anyway. And I've been really happy with it for what it is. It's been reliable. It's had a lot of ammo through it over the years. It's been exactly what I wanted, a modern 1911. And, the folks that I share it with have enjoyed it too. But that's just me. As a historian, casual shooter, I love its place in history. The Marine Corps, though, this was dreamt up and put into trials by the old guard, generals, colonels, the tradition of the 1911 and accurate shots and all that good stuff. But then it was issued to the youngest, slickest, most experienced operators who grew up on the Glock and the 9mm. But at this point, the Beretta had been in service for decades. slightly less felt recoil. It didn't work out. They preferred the additional shots of the Beretta. Not to mention they did have access to the railed version here. It's lighter, double action. I still maintain the single action pull in the Beretta is fine. It's safer because, of course, with the M45A1, even though you do have a firing pin block, if you want to carry one in the chamber, your options are cocked and locked or, yeah. And that specified 5-pound trigger, you're going to want that safety on there. And, of course, they went with the 7-shot mags. They are high-quality mags, no argument there. You get 7+1 compared to 15+1. And it weighs more than even the original 1911 thanks to the beefed up slide and rail and all that. Not a whole lot more, but a bit more. About 40 ounces plus compared with, you know, about 34 ounces here. So this gun is a good half-pound lighter. And then you get into the whole stopping power argument. 9mm versus 45. I don't want to delve into it now. There are situations, especially subsonic, where 45 does well. It's a big bullet, but it's moving a lot slower than 9mm. Now, that matters more on the civilian front because you can put hollow points, other defensive rounds in these. The military, especially back at that time, was expected to use the ball round. So that did kind of hinder 9mm and not let it do its thing. That said, though, even if it goes through them, are 2 hits with 9mm better than 1 miss with 45? And it really depends on training and experience. For the old-timers who grew up with the 1911 and the young bucks that did practice with it, it might have been, you know, better or equal. But for most of your guys, especially since it's a sidearm, not an offensive gun, this isn't the Cruiser pistol after all.
Yes.
Carrying a gun like this just makes more sense in 2013, 2014 to a lot of the Marines. And again, keep in mind, this is only meant for MEUSOC and a few other special detachments within the Marine Corps and was not used by the Army, the Navy, anyone else. And then in 2015, kind of seeing what other special forces and SOCOM are using, the Marine Corps Command finally authorized the carriage of the Glock. Now, this is my 19X. It's not exactly right. In 2016, they ordered 419 M's, still in the more or less black finish, based on kind of the FBI standard. And those would supplement the toolbox being adopted as the M007 because 007 is a cool designation no matter what. So to recap, those in MEUSOC in 2016, they can choose the M45A1. There's some older M45s knocking about. They can choose the standard Beretta M9 with or without laser grips, or the M9A1 with or without laser grips. And now they can opt to get their hands on one of the few hundred Glock 19s if they want. Guess which ones they choose. A lot the 19, and some they'll go for the M9A1 just because there's more available, and to be fair, there are some benefits to it as well. Fewer and fewer are picking this gun. And I'm sure the same would have gone if they'd gone with the Springfield. I'm not dinging it for the exact model they picked in 2012. I'm dinging it for picking a 45 ACP 1911 into the 21st century. for anything but like match competition shooting. However, there were a few issues with this gun that were just special to Colt. According to Chris Bartacci, during testing and trials 2011-2012, the forged slide and frame both on the prototype versions experienced cracking, fracturing, what have you. I have no reason to disbelieve him on that, although I do think it's funny. He's often credited with being a big Colt fanboy. That's not true. He's an AR-15 fan. Because if you think about it, all of Colt's other products, the 1911, their wheel guns, that's not Chris's bag. He's just really a Colt AR person, and that's it. Just thought I'd throw that out there. The Marine Corps wanted their guns to last thousands upon thousands of rounds. The ideal thing was, okay, every 10,000 rounds fired through a 45 ACP frame, we're going to send it back for refurbishment and renewal. And a lot of those rounds would be training, accuracy, practice, and then combat deployment. However, it was stated by the PWS Center, if in a pinch, pistols should be able to go up to 80,000 rounds without major parts breakage. Something tells me this gun's not doing that. Very few modern 1911s probably would. They also claim that by the early 21st century, looking at their old 1911 frames, again, remember they hadn't bought new ones since 1945, some of them had up to 500,000 rounds fired through them. Just the frame. Obviously slides, barrels, all that, long toast and replaced multiple times. So the Marine Corps had pretty strict durability standards, reliability standards. We see this with their rifles too. Obviously they worked it out. They adopted it in 2012. I'm not going to say what happened behind the scenes. It doesn't really matter because these never really served long enough to get to that high round count. But they did serve long enough to get to a finish issue. By 2014, this Cerakote, kind of desert tan, or so I'm told, finish, was showing wear. Now, originally Colt went with this finish because it was part of the specifications. Not necessarily the color directly, but the finish had to be non-reflective, kind of a matte, muted, non-glossy, and it had to be within military standard color spectrum. Black, green, brown, tan, you know, so sorry, no pink. And Colt went with the Cerakote, and it seems to just be directly applied to the stainless steel and steel parts. And I believe Colt subcontracted it out. And yeah, by 2014, those that did go to the field, the finish was coming off. Either through hard use, cleaning, maintenance, practice, environmental things, whatever, it's coming off. It's not durable enough. Ultimately, Colt says, oopsie, the subcontractor we used didn't apply it properly. And the Marine Corps does call upon them to honor their warranty. And now we can talk about just how many of these were shipped. Again, the original IDIC contract was up to 12,000. That's not how many they got. The initial order, again, was 4,036. And I don't know exactly how long it took them to deliver, but it seems to be pretty quick. Of those, the Marines would return 1,000 to Colt by 2015 to be essentially replaced. And according to sources online, of those guns returned, of the 1,000, 470 showed signs of field use, 530, so more than half, were new unissued, basically. And yes, Colt would X out the Marine marking and sell them commercially later on for tons of money. I would have enjoyed getting one, but not enough for that. Not that dedicated, sorry. And what they were doing, they went to a new finish, what they called Deco Bond, which was an ion bonded finish. It's a darker brown, or so I'm told. And it is meant to be a more durable, more weather, more field resistant finish. Problem, it's not as rust corrosion preventative as Cerakote. Cerakote's a good finish, and probably if Colt had applied it correctly, might have lasted longer. On the other hand, the Marines are pretty dang hard on their guns, so with all the training, use, what have you, it is still basically a painted, baked-on finish. Regardless, Colt supplies 1,000 M45A1s back to the Marine Corps as warranty replacements, and then sells off the 1,000 they got back. That seems to be the final batch shipped to them in 2015 into early 2016, meaning the total number is 5,036. However, 1,000 of those were replacements, so in service, basically, you had fewer than 4,000, and based on what we've seen of those, at least half never saw any kind of field use. Instead, guys were opting to hang on to the Beretta, again, because they had quite a few M9 and M9A1s, and they're familiar with it at this point. And they have a few hundred Glocks. Nevertheless, they do have options. But these guns have the common 9mm cartridge, which is pretty much common with the rest of Special Forces and the military. By this time, very few guns in the U.S. inventory are in 45 ACP. Even the Mark 23 is out. There might be some HK 45 CTs knocking about. That's pretty small numbers within the Navy. So, towards the end of 2016, this all culminates when the powers that be at the Marine Corps say, we're going to be retiring our 45s, the M45, the interim guns, and the M45A1. We're going to be phasing them out in favor of newer guns. Keep in mind, this is shortly before the MHS trials are to conclude. I'm sure that had a little bit to do with it. Part of it was just simple feedback from the soldiers, issues dealing with Colts, the whole finish debacle, what have you. So that 12,000 piece order was never even fulfilled. 1/3 was delivered, which was guaranteed. And it's an expensive gun compared to either the Beretta, the Glock, or whatever else you have. Now, the MEUSOC guys have a choice through 2019 which of these 3 guns they can deploy with. But in 2020, they really start pulling the remaining M45A1s out. And to be fair, they start pulling out the remaining M9A1s too, because, well, you know what's coming. Look, I'm not saying even I like it myself, but at this point in history, all roads, when you're talking U.S. service handguns to the present day, just lead to the Sig Sauer M17, or really the M18. And it was really the Marine Corps that decided to go for the compact 3.9-inch barrel M18 over the full-size 4.7-inch barrel M17. And that's what they've ordered. They started off getting 35,000 of these. They adopted it officially in 2019, started to field it in 2020, and by this point, they've replaced most other handguns. 7-shot mag. I can say that when you go to chamber round, it's a little faster on the 7 versus the 8. M45A1 and other M45s, yeah, they're out. And very few, if any, Berettas are left. About the only one that's hung on a little bit. They still do have some Glock M007s knocking about. Officially, the M18 does replace it. But the Glocks are still pretty new. And I was curious if MEUSOC, Force Recon, were doing something different or going with the M18. And at this time, it seems like the majority of those guys are going for the M18, with the Glock being selected a minority of time for missions. Of course, the war, the situation has changed quite a bit. Habit. The Marine Corps pistol, investigations notwithstanding. So what do I think about my Colt over here? Alright, start off with Fox's Springfield Operator with the Phoenix ammo. And back to my Colt. Here we have it. I'm very glad I was able to find Fox that Springfield Marine style operator. Objectively speaking, the differences between it and this gun are up to taste. For example, G10 grips or Pipemire grips. The more traditional recoil system versus the dual. Trigger, we kind of went back and forth on which we thought had a nicer trigger, but they're both quite good. And, you know, cost is even commensurate. Like I said, I went with the standard commercial version, not the fancy custom shop, so price point wasn't ridiculous when I picked this up. Can't even remember what it was. It's been so long ago, and money's changed then, so it doesn't really matter. So we each have one, and we're good. Seeing that they're pretty much equal in terms of handling and reliability for all intents and purposes, for me, this being with some history tips it over the edge. I'm glad I hung on to one of these for what they are, because it is a rare gun. With just over 5,000 total serving the Marine Corps, and of those, probably only 1,000 ever getting released to the public, and those at huge prices, I doubt I'll ever get one. But even the civilian guns, production is pretty low. They started off out of the custom shop, and then they introduced the standard version. And then they quit making the custom shop version because Colt downsized their custom shop so much, they just kind of quit. But at the same time, I think Colt was keeping the standard line up and running 2015, 2016, because they thought they might get another Marine Corps addition onto the contract, especially after the ion bonded finish came in. They didn't. And I think once that was clear, once the Marine Corps made the announcement at the end of 2016 that they not only weren't buying more of these, but they were going to be retiring them over the next few years, it seems like Colt shut down the M45A1 production line. Now, the last one shipped commercially did have the ion bonded finish. But, you know, this is the original. Most of them that served the Marine Corps had the Cerakote finish. Only those 1,000 or so had the ion bond. I'm cool with it. It's my gun. Wear and tear just adds to the character. I looked to see when was the last time I received any M45A1s on my books. It was September 2019, but it was from Lou Horton, who was going out of business. Those guns could have very, very likely been new old stock that they'd hung on to for a couple of years. So it looks like, yeah, production was ending 2016, 2017, 2018, somewhere in that time. Looking at serial numbers, and this is really hard to do, the highest serial numbers were in the low 18,000s, and they had the EGA, Eagle, Globe, and Anchor suffix. Does that mean they made a total of 18,000? I don't know, but I doubt it, because what I figure happened, they reserved up to 12,000 serial numbers for the Marine Corps, even if they only ever used 4,000 or 5,000, and then the others were civilian. It seems plausible that only 6, 8, maybe 10,000 were made for the civilian market in total. And considering these were kind of here and gone, and then they'd pop back up for a little bit, and the early ones were custom shop. Yes, they had the nice Pelican case. Yes, they had the Otis cleaning kit. They were also super expensive for what they were. And even these weren't cheap, although again, they were pretty commensurate with other higher-end 1911s, Kimber, Springfield, what have yous. Still cheaper than a Wilson. My point is, I just don't think that many were ever made for anyone, and that's got to be worth something. But I absolutely think moving away from this to the Glock was the absolute right decision. Although, to be determined on the Sauer M18. I can say I do like shooting mine. That's just a fact. But I also like shooting my 1911 45. I just wish the ammo were cheaper. As I said at the top of the video, for the testings Fox and I did, I picked it up from Phoenix, which was about the best place I could find for 45, more or less mil-spec ball. Didn't want to run like defensive hollow points, Golden Saber or whatever through it. Not for what we're doing. But let me know what you think. Do you own one of these? If so, which of the 3 versions released to the public? One of the few surplus ones, custom shop one, or just a bog standard one like mine? Or maybe you own one of the Springfield MC Operator loadeds like Fox now has. If so, would love to hear what you think about it. Just a little comparison video on really what is the last 1911 that'll ever serve in the U.S. military, unless something really, really changes. Appreciate you hanging out today. Pretty nice. A little warm. Not bad, though. If you could, as always, like, share, subscribe. Please do comment. And like to really help support us, go over and check out Patreon.